Welcome to the Mucked Up My Self-Care podcast.
I'm Jill from New York.
And I'm Linda from Tasmania.
We are two moms from opposite sides of the world who are living, demonstrating, and helping moms across the world build their self-care asset bank.
Ready to dive in? Messy, interrupted, imperfect, and most of all mucked up. Let's get going. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good evening. Oh.
Happy to be back recording again with you, Linda.
Yeah, always. Yep. And highs, lows. We usually start with highs and lows.
Yeah, definitely.
And after our recent episode a few weeks ago where we talked all about why we do that, it's a great tradition to keep going with, I think. So, do you want to start?
Sure. Okay, let's see. We're going to start with my low. My low is my school sniffles that Declan had last week has transferred over to me this week. I am just starting to feel it, and I'm like out of energy. That's the first thing I think that has bothered me is my eyes are so swollen and itchy, and I feel so tired, and I got a pretty decent night's sleep. So just push through. Thank you, allergies. Not my favorite time of the year. Anyway, moving on. My high is I have become a PTA mom, and I'm kind of scared and excited about it. We had our first PTA meeting this week, and I got to bring in some information to share with them so all the parents could get to know me a little better. And there was a whole bunch of parents that brought in some stuff to share and to introduce themselves. So I got to bring in the information about my book and our podcast here at Mucked Up My Self-Care, and then announce the Mama Outspoken podcast coming up in October. So very excited to get more information out there to new people, but also it's like it was a good practice to talk to strangers that I now we'll spend the year getting to know in these PTA meetings. So it was a bittersweet kind of thing of stepping out of your comfort zone as well as getting really into being in an outside of the comfort zone spot.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a big step forward to push those comfort zones and everything else like that. So really happy for you.
Thanks. Linda, your highs and lows, did you share?
Oh, so I think a big high is starting to come into some warmer weather. So spent a few hours out in the garden this afternoon, and the kids were getting lots of fresh air and just away from some of the sickness we've had, and just lots of sunshine and fresh air. And that always helps them sleep well and gets them away from screens and all that sort of stuff. So that's been really good. And I think the low, just for me, I completely mucked up my calendar, and I'm a day late for the social media boot camp that we have going on for my Sexy Business team this weekend. So time zones, and I don't know what happened, and so I feel a little bit thrown in my thinking that I was 24 hours later I was going to be there. Well, it's just anyway, the timing did not work.
It's what happens when we are globally working together on our businesses.
No.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It is. It's tricky.
Yeah.
And today, ironically, we're actually talking about making time for self-care.
Yeah. So when we don't have our calendars right, it's like, how do we make time for self-care when we were supposed to be somewhere?
So I guess the obvious first question is, are you making time for self-care?
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Has it
Yeah.
always been that way?
Is it a yes? Isn't it even a yes? I try to. Are you trying to?
Yes. Yep.
So I wonder if this is it though. Like as we the things that are we're gonna say schedulable, like have a spot on our calendar that are our self-care routines. Linda, that's you going to the gym.
Yep.
Me, that's like my church time. It's just these things that we know happen every week, or we want to make sure happen every week. And
This podcast.
Yeah, this podcast. Yep. And even like right now when we're recording this, we snuck in this recording into the Mom Outspoken Village gathering because it was just us today. So we're like, hey, let's do a self-care activity in this hour and get some podcast time together.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
And I love that for the village because I think that is definitely where I want the village to go, is to be able to have conversations like this, to get some self-care in when we can't schedule something on the calendar. And this is the one spot we do have in. But then there's other things that we both do that I don't feel like we could schedule in. I'm not going to schedule on the calendar, go pick up the dog poop because I want to be outside and get the energy from the ground, and from grounding.
Yep.
I'm not doing that. But that's a fun question to have to ask now, and challenging to see, are we really making the time on our calendars for, or even just not even on the calendar, just in our minds? Are we making the time in our mind for it, being aware of what's going on in our day, even if it's not on the calendar?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on
some of that, like for me, the gardening and getting outside and the fresh air was a little bit weather dependent, because we've had almost feels like a month of rain and wind and everything. So it was actually not on my calendar, and not necessarily those few hours we're just white space really to get on top of washing, and which I did as well. So that was lovely. And I just wonder if we're slotting it in now easier than we used to, and therefore it doesn't need as much dedicated time. Otherwise, it doesn't get done.
Yeah, we practiced at this now so much more than we were a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
That it becomes almost like second nature of like seeing a white space on our calendar, just white space being an opening that we don't have something scheduled in, and knowing we got nothing for 2 hours. What are we putting in this spot for a little bit of me time, or just to get outside and get some sunshine?
Yep. And I don't know that I would have necessarily categorized getting out of the garden as self-care before as well. I may not have appreciated the time that I could take. It would have been more about, what are the kids doing and what does the garden need doing? I've got a big tree bush out the front that I've been slowly attacking because it was massively overgrown. And so I've been trying to shape it now back into a bit more of a shape and cut it down. But even just that for me has actually been really great to have it, to see the progress and to work on.
Yeah.
It's good. And when you see the efforts, the fruits of your efforts, you realize like, okay, I like how that looks, and I actually like how it made me feel doing this work at the completion of it. It's just like when we finish cleaning our kitchens and we're like, we love the sparkly countertops. It's like, that was a little bit of self-care, even though I hated every second of it, because look at the results, right?
I know. And how long will it stay there? But yes. Yeah. And there will continue to be dirty kitchens that require our attention and seem to be more important than everything else going on as well.
So when you are thinking of something that's not typically on your calendar that's scheduled in, like you have a self-care thing that you want to go do. Like for me, I want to go out and do, like I did my bouquet workshop a couple of months ago, like trying to figure out, is that spot available on my calendar? But when you're
looking at making the time for a self-care thing, do you find that it takes more time setting it up and making the preparations than actually getting to actually do the thing that you wanted to do?
Sometimes. We're both in the habit now of sitting down with our week and mapping it out ahead of time because it works. And the weeks that I don't dedicate to that generally fall apart much easier, apparently. Yes. I think it's more the time I take thinking about doing some self-care or thinking about
so before you can figure out what you want to do for self-care, that time that it takes to figure out what would be some self-care you could fit into this spot.
Or thinking, so in the past it would have been a bit more of the, I really should do some self-care. I really should do some self-care. And the amount of time that I'd said that to myself, I actually could have done some.
Right.
This is what I do. I go through with the kids as well. Sometimes they will complain about something for 5 minutes and they could have done it already.
Right? You would have done by the time.
Gosh,
for us to stop arguing about it.
Empty the dishwasher for God's sake. Far out. Seriously. And yes, I'm sure. Yes, there are times when I fall into that category as well. And I'm wondering, is that a lack of motivation or is that more a self-criticism because maybe I'm tired or feeling like my needs are not met or feeling a bit like a victim or a martyr in the house duties or parenting or all those sort of things. So it all snowballs.
Yeah, because it also
rapidly.
We could be so far down that we know we need much more self-care than a little bit. And I'm too far gone now. It's not going to matter whatever I do. And that self-doubt. Or is it that we don't want to give ourselves permission to go do something? Because it's just, what are we having to say no to in order to say yes to that? And who's there to help and say yes to the things we're saying no to for us?
Yes, exactly. It's a loop. It's a loop. And then we end up just spending so much time in that loop. That we're like, oh, look, it's bedtime. It's bedtime. It's dinner time. It's time to do work or whatever else there is to do.
Maybe sleep will just be my self-care for the day.
Yes.
Still, are we getting enough sleep to count it as self-care?
Yep, I am definitely not today. That's for sure. Yeah.
It was very challenging. I'm going to bring this up because it has to do with making time on the calendar. But at the PTA meeting, they get over all of the events coming up for the next month that they want volunteers for, and you want to be involved in as well. So I took a page out of our friend Kim's book and did not volunteer right away. Did not pull my calendar out to see where these things fell. And I just went home and went over everything with my husband, gave him the lowdown on what the meeting went over. And then I sat on the computer and put things in the calendar. And if there were conflicts, I didn't leave them in the calendar. I just knew automatically I wouldn't be able to do that. So the things that ended up in the calendar, I know I can either volunteer for if I want to, or just at least attend. And I think I'm going to give myself a little bit of space on volunteering at first.
Amazing. Please do. Please do. Because,
I don't know what October is going to feel like yet. I mean, it's going to be big for you alone. You have some things launching as well. But my intention is to get season 2 of Mom Outspoken podcast up and going with Bobby. So, if that's the case, we're going to be busy on Thursday nights recording him and I. So, I got to make sure I'm aware of that and what we're doing. So, need some space.
It's a lot.
Okay, we're going to
what's your priority?
Yeah.
What's your priority here? Because while it's fun and exciting to dive into new things like PTAs or all the rest of it, you've also got other commitments which are long-standing, and yes, need to take my own advice on that one. Thank you very much. Oh my goodness.
We already had to figure out like the next PTA meeting's on a Tuesday, and I do a church meeting once a month for their like committee board, and that's the week before the PTA one. So I was like, I can't miss 2 weeks in a row. I already have to miss the following week after that. So that'd be 3 weeks in a row technically. So we can't do that. So I'm like, hubby, you're on the PTA too. You get to go to that meeting.
Yep.
So,
good.
I needed to delegate.
Yep.
So that way we could figure out, like, mastermind. It may not be exactly self-care, but it's business stuff. So it's something that I'm dedicated to. And I got to make sure I'm still saying yes, like you're saying, what's my priorities?
Yeah.
Because that would be overwhelming.
Yeah, exactly. And I was on the PTA for a little while, probably 2 years, when the boys were a lot younger and we just moved to this suburb. And I remember taking Quinn and him crawling around the floor at the meeting at the time. And then after I got pregnant and after Ziggy came on, I just had to decide that, you know what, that's enough for now, because there's only so much I can do.
Yeah.
It was a good point of contact for a little while as well. Yeah. And I think things like PTAs and in business and on podcasts, they are a little bit of a revolving door. So there will be people there that will have kids who are about to go to, what would it be, middle school? I don't know if it's just the lower grades that this school is concentrating on, or whether it's the whole.
Yeah. Ours is the lower grades for elementary. We call it primary school.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we'd have parents that would get their kids would move on to high school. Yeah. And so they would leave the PTAs. Yeah. And so then you'd need new parents to come in and out, and so, and some of these parents have been there for 15 years because they had 2 or 3 kids through.
What's nice is that ours includes the community as well. So you don't have to have children in the school to be able to be a part of our PTA. You can just live in the community and be in the district and be a part of it. So you can still be involved as to what things are happening in your area. So I think that's a really cool element for us as well. It gets different exposure for the school, and then my selfish part of what I bring to the table,
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So being that we have made more time, what if someone is coming in very fresh to self-care? Maybe hearing this podcast for the first time, or only fairly new to these episodes. What would be your tips for making time for self-care?
Well, I know you and I both know how overwhelming it feels to try and find time in our schedule to do. And we did a podcast episode of that early in the season too, about having time. Well, what was it? Won't make the time. I forget what it was. A little catchy title, but
yeah.
I'm like, no, we're not.
Can't find it. Won't make it. Can't find it. Won't find it. Can't make it. Yes.
Something like that. Yeah. Starting simple. And staying simple. That's even still, I think, where we've both reverted back to, instead of trying to go out and do all these big things that society is telling us counts as self-care. Is like, what counts as self-care for you? So figure out when you're needing it, which is most likely all the time, especially just starting out, and figure out what's the simplest thing that you can do that's going to bring you joy. And I think that's the simplest way of bringing it to acceptance of something counted as self-care, if in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I agree. Mm.
And to make it even simpler, Linda and I have gone over a little bit of a list of the simple things that we needed when we first started out. So let us know and we can share that with you. But if you're also listening and you have suggestions on how you're making time for self-care or some simple self-care to do for those who are needing help and making the time for it, let us know. Again, our email's in the show notes, mucked-up-my-self-care-podcast@gmail.com. Shoot us an email and we'll share it.
Really love to start a conversation around some of that, and just hear what you think as you're listening along as well. So so speaking of time, it is approaching midnight for me.
We're so close to bedtime. Pumpkin o'clock, right?
So,
in that case, we'll wrap up this conversation and be back in the studio next time. So until then,
we hope you can unstuck your muck.
Bye.